June 18, 2020. Markus Braun, the CEO of Germany's most valuable fintech company, uploads a video to YouTube. He stares into the camera, visibly shaken, and tells the world that his auditors cannot locate 1.9 billion euros in cash. That is 1/4 of the company's entire balance sheet. Just gone. Within 72 hours, Braun is arrested, his chief operating officer has vanished off the face of the earth, and a company once valued at 24 billion euros is filing for bankruptcy. It would become the largest corporate fraud in modern European history. But here is the part that should genuinely disturb you. Journalists had been screaming about this fraud for 6 years. The German government did not investigate Wirecard. They investigated the journalists instead. How do you hide $2 billion that never existed? How do you fool a Big Four auditor, the German government, Goldman Sachs, and billions of euros worth of investors for over a decade? And how does the man who orchestrated the whole thing end up walking free in Moscow, protected by Russian intelligence? Let us follow the money. Wirecard started in 1999 in a Munich suburb as a tiny payment processor for online gambling and pornography websites. Not exactly the origin story of a national champion. In 2002, the company nearly went bankrupt after a suspicious burglary at its offices. An investor named Paul Bauer-Schlichtergroll bought the company for just €500,000, and he installed a former KPMG consultant named Markus Braun as CEO. And what Braun did next was the first red flag nobody wanted to see. In 2005, Wirecard got listed on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange through a reverse merger with a defunct call center group. No proper IPO, no real scrutiny, just a backdoor entry onto one of Europe's most prestigious exchanges. By 2006, they had purchased Excom Bank, gaining a banking license and direct deals with Visa and MasterCard. Germany's politicians started paying attention. Here was a homegrown fintech that could compete with Silicon Valley. By September 2018, Wirecard had replaced Commerzbank on the prestigious DAX 30 index. Think about what that means. A former porn payment processor was now ranked among the 30 most valuable companies in Germany, worth more than Deutsche Bank. Politicians paraded Braun around the world as the face of Germany's tech revolution. Chancellor Angela Merkel personally lobbied for Wirecard during a trip to China in 2019. But the entire machine was running on a LIE. The key to understanding how Wirecard faked $2 billion is a structure called third-party acquirers. These were small, opaque companies in Dubai, Singapore, and Manila that supposedly processed payments on Wirecard's behalf in markets where Wirecard did not have its own license. By 2018, these third-party partners accounted for roughly half of all global transactions Wirecard reported, and nearly all of the company's profit came from just 3 of these partners. One of them, Al Alam Solutions, operated out of a single office in the Burj Khalifa in Dubai with fewer than 10 employees. Yet Wirecard claimed Al Alam processed 350 million euros in payments from 34 clients every single month. That is not a typo. A one-man operation in a Dubai skyscraper, supposedly handling billions in annual payment volume. The cash these partners claimed to hold was counted directly on Wirecard's own balance sheet. If you have ever trusted a company with your savings, this is the part that should terrify you. The money sitting in those accounts did not exist. Behind this web of phantom companies was a man named Jan Marsalek. He was an Austrian high school dropout who joined Wirecard at age 20 and became chief operating officer by 30. Marsalek controlled all of Wirecard's international operations and personally built the entire third-party acquirer network. And what investigators would later uncover about Marsalek makes the financial fraud look almost quaint by comparison. Marsalek orchestrated a series of offshore acquisitions at wildly inflated prices. In 2015, Wirecard paid 300 million euros for an Indian payments business that had changed hands just weeks earlier for 37 million. 300 million for a company worth 37 million. That gap, that was the fraud, hiding in plain sight. But the real shock came later. According to multiple intelligence agencies, Marsalek had been recruited by Russian intelligence as early as 2010, the same year he was named chief operating officer. He had traveled to Russia more than 70 times. Nobody at Wirecard asked why. So who tried to stop it? A handful of journalists who risked their careers and their safety. In January 2019, Financial Times journalist Dan McCrum published an explosive investigation based on whistleblower documents from inside Wirecard's own Singapore office. The whistleblower PAV Gill was Wirecard's senior legal counsel for the entire Asia-Pacific region. He had seen the fake transactions firsthand and decided the world needed to know. The Financial Times revealed evidence of round-tripping, inflated revenues, and fabricated transactions across Wirecard's Asian operations. By March 2019, the Financial Times exposed that half of Wirecard's business was outsourced to partners with no visible offices and no verifiable operations. Wirecard's response was not to answer the allegations, it was to attack. They sued the Financial Times. They hired Rami El Obeidi, the former head of Libyan Foreign Intelligence, to run sting operations against McCrum and other journalists. They accused the Financial Times of colluding with short sellers to manipulate the stock. The German establishment rallied behind them. This is where the story turns from corporate fraud into something far more disturbing. Instead of investigating Wirecard, Germany's top financial regulator BaFin turned its attention to the people who were exposing it. In February 2019, BaFin took the extraordinary step of banning short selling of Wirecard stock for 2 months. Think about that. The government regulator used its power not to protect investors from fraud, but to protect the fraudster from investors. BaFin then filed criminal complaints against Financial Times journalists for alleged market manipulation. Commerzbank analysts called the Financial Times articles fake news. Goldman Sachs maintained a conviction buy rating on Wirecard stock until September 2019. Meanwhile, the Financial Reporting Enforcement Panel, the watchdog supposed to audit companies like Wirecard, had just 15 employees and an annual budget of 6 million euros. They only concluded something was wrong after the company was already dead. Would you have caught it? Almost nobody did. Then, in the spring of 2020, the walls finally closed in. On April 28, 2020, KPMG released a special audit stating they could not verify the majority of Wirecard's profits from 2016 through 2018. The stock crashed 26% in a single day. On June 5th, Munich police raided Wirecard's headquarters. On June 18th, Ernst & Young officially refused to sign off on the 2019 accounts. That same evening, a newly hired compliance executive named James Friess, on his literal second day at work, sat down with Wirecard's internal documents. Within hours, he discovered what auditors had missed for over a decade. The 1.9 billion euros that Wirecard claimed sat in trustee accounts in the Philippines simply did not exist. The 2 Philippine banks confirmed they had never held the money. Let that sink in. One man, on day 2 of his job, found a $2 billion hole that the most sophisticated auditors, regulators, and analysts in Europe had missed for years. On June 19th, Braun resigned. On June 22nd, he was arrested. On June 25th, 2020, Wirecard filed for insolvency. It became the first DAX 30 company in history to go bankrupt. The company that had been valued at 24 billion euros was eventually sold to Santander for just 100 million euros. That is a destruction of over 23 billion euros in value. But the most dangerous man in this story was already gone. As Wirecard collapsed, Jan Marsalek told colleagues he was flying to Manila to prove his innocence. He never got on that plane. Instead, he fled to Belarus and then vanished into Russia. And if you think this story ends with a fugitive hiding in some Moscow apartment, you have not seen the bigger picture. In September 2025, a joint investigation by Der Spiegel, PBS Frontline, and The Insider tracked Marsalek to central Moscow, where he lives under the fake identity of Alexander Neladov. Journalists photographed him strolling hand in hand with his girlfriend, Tatiana Spiridonova, a translator with direct ties to the FSB. Marsalek now commutes daily to the FSB headquarters at Lubyanka Square. His phone was detected there 304 times between January and April 2025. He has traveled to Crimea, occupied by Russia, at least 5 times. According to intelligence sources, he has participated in combat operations in Ukraine. He ran a SPY ring from Moscow that targeted investigative journalists across Europe. In March 2025, 6 Bulgarians were convicted in a London court for espionage operations directed by Marsalek on behalf of the FSB. The man who orchestrated Europe's largest corporate fraud is now one of the Kremlin's most valuable intelligence assets. Markus Braun, meanwhile, remains in a Munich jail. His trial started in late 2022. Even his own defense team has admitted the 1.9 billion euros never existed. So what does this mean for you? Wirecard fooled Ernst & Young, one of the Big Four auditing firms, for over a decade. It fooled BaFin, Germany's top financial regulator. It fooled Goldman Sachs, Commerzbank, and thousands of institutional investors managing your pension funds, your retirement savings, your future. The question is no longer how they faked it. The question is, who else is faking it right now? And who is looking? If you want to see how another massive corporate fraud unfolded and what it cost ordinary investors, check out the next video. Subscribe so you do not miss it.